Great, welcome back. So what we're going to talk about is the article's definitions of necessity versus opportunity-based entrepreneurship, home-based businesses. We'll also talk about the research gap as identified in the article, and of course some of the kind of interesting facts pertaining to home-based businesses. So they talk a little bit about necessity versus opportunity-driven entrepreneurship. And those of you that have been watching my channel probably are familiar with this terminology. Necessity-based entrepreneurship basically means an entrepreneur becomes a business owner or becomes an entrepreneur because they feel they have no other choice. They're almost forced into it. And what's forcing them? It could be something like an emergency. In other words, they are in danger of losing their life, limb, or eyesight. They are in danger of starving to death. They are in danger of losing their shelter. It is such a bad circumstance that they have no other choice other than to become an entrepreneur. That's what we call a necessity-driven entrepreneur. The opportunity-driven entrepreneur is one who obviously does not fit those classic necessity conditions, but they see or they perceive or they are going to create some sort of an opportunity out there. And they feel that seizing that particular opportunity would enhance their quality of life or give them some sort of an opportunity for self-realization. In other words, doing something that they love, making a positive difference for the community, something like that. But they're not forced into it. Necessity-driven entrepreneurship is very much being pushed into becoming an entrepreneur, and opportunity-driven entrepreneurship is very much a pull kind of thing. You're being kind of drawn towards bettering your life, whether that is financially, physically, emotionally, etc. So you're probably thinking, well, that's kind of weird, because is that a real dichotomy even? I mean, let's take somebody who is about to have their house foreclosed upon and therefore they become an entrepreneur. Okay, that's a pretty clear-cut case for necessity-driven entrepreneurship. But let's say they're going to have their house foreclosed upon and therefore they're going to live in their parents' garage. So they won't really be homeless, so they become an entrepreneur because they no longer want to live in their parents' garage. Is that an opportunity-driven entrepreneur because they see a chance to better their life? Is it an opportunity-driven entrepreneur because they feel that their emotional well-being would be linked to no longer living in their parents' garage, and their emotional well-being would be linked to having a house similar to what they had before? Okay, by the same token, let's say that it's an opportunity-driven entrepreneur because they perceive some sort of a desire to do something great for the community. Okay, so that's a pulling thing. And yet if they don't do it, they're going to be miserable and hate their life, which is very much a push thing, and therefore it's necessity. So the point of the article and the point that I'm making is that this either-or thing between necessity versus opportunity-driven entrepreneurship is really irrelevant. Every time an entrepreneur's actions can be attributed to both necessity and opportunity forces. It's just a matter of degree of which one maybe is greater. And of course, it may not even matter which one is greater. What matters is the fact that they launched a new business, not so much whether it was necessity or opportunity driven, right? Because they're going to be a little bit of both. Now, the article on page 429 gives an interesting definition of home-based business, which they call HBBs. And they say that a home-based business is different from other kinds of small business ownership or different kinds of other kinds of entrepreneurship because of the fact that the entrepreneur operates that business out of his or her home. So in other words, you've got a lot of small business owners that maybe operate out of a shop or they have leased a space that's their business space. A home-based business means you're doing it inside your home. That could be within like a home office. That could be in your backyard. It could be in your she shed. It could be anywhere, but it's in some sort of an extension of what will be called your home. That's the home-based business. And the contribution that this article makes, and it lays it out pretty clearly on page 4029, is also that while we do understand the results of home-based businesses, what we don't really understand are the tipping points or those incidents that encourage a small business, or excuse me, that encourage a manager or an employee to go into business on their own in a home-based business capacity. We don't really understand whether it's necessity or opportunity driven or something totally different. We just don't understand that little spark that lights the fire to become a home-based business owner. So they give some interesting kind of theses or hypotheses of what they think might be some of the tipping points to launch a home-based business. And it's different from the either-or dichotomy of necessity versus opportunity-driven. They say it could be their career. It could be also pertaining to where they are with their family life. Are they married? Are they single? Do they have kids or not? And of course, do they have any sort of business experience, right? Do they have experience in mobilizing resources and achieving business outcomes? So again, what is their biography is the first thing, their education and background, that's their career. What is their family situation? And what is their experience specifically in running a business, mobilizing those resources specifically? And they give some interesting statistics, which I think are interesting. This article is exploring specifically the United Kingdom, so they give some comparative statistics. They say that 76% of home-based businesses were owned by males, 55% were one-person-owned businesses, and 57% were more than 5 years old. And these statistics that they cite are from Australia. An interesting thing that they also talk about is that the spaces between home and work in the industrial age have become blurred. And they talk about now, more than ever, there's more and more opportunities for home-based work within the United Kingdom. I think that's an interesting statement because you look at the history of work itself, and let's go way back to like pre-industrial revolution, like even medieval Europe, right? Home-based businesses were much more common in medieval Europe, right? It was not uncommon for a carpenter, for example, to work out of, an area right near his home or in his home or in his homestead. Blacksmiths operated in or near their home. Again, you have to think about why. People were not, driving, long distances to go to an office or anything like that. So home-based business is actually one of the more traditional forms of entrepreneurship if you look at the pre-industrial revolution. It was only during the Industrial Revolution that all these things kind of changed, where people are having to go work in factories, and that's what kind of drove production. But the idea of a home-based business as being something entirely new is a little bit strange, right? Because this is a more traditional form of labor. I remember years ago I went to a museum in Alsace, Strasbourg specifically, and it was all about the history of workers in Alsace. It was a very interesting museum. And it showed that a lot of workers basically crawled out of their beds, walked a few feet, into their workshop in their home, and they did whatever they were doing, whether it was knitting or making metal tools or whatever they were doing. It was all pretty much done in the home. So this is kind of a more natural form of work. Now, they also talk about some increasing factors in the United Kingdom that are contributing to the rise of home-based businesses. This is on page 431. They say the aging population is more likely to see a growth in semi-retired people running home-based businesses. Wonder why that would be, especially for my entrepreneurship students. Why do you think? You might want to comment below and let me know what you think. Part of it could be, again, semi-retired people. What factors would encourage them to go into becoming entrepreneurs? Is it the fact that maybe they have a pension? They've got money saved up? They've got work experience? They're at that point in their career where it feels right? What do you think? Post that below. They also talk about another thing is the younger generation is more likely to set up home-based businesses, again, because of the rise of digital technology. And they point specifically to digital technology and its impact in rural areas. I wonder how digital technology impacts home-based businesses for the younger generation. What do you all think? Make sure you comment below. Here's some ideas to kind of think about. Think about computer programmers. Do they really need an office to work in, or can they just migrate to their couch and work? What about people like me that are doing YouTube videos for people like you to watch? Do I have to do these in an office? Or could I do these things at home? What about social media influencers? Can they do this at home? What about so many things out there that can be done from the home thanks to digitalization? Even running call centers. People could be employees of a call center out of their home. What do you think? Comment below. And of course, they also talk about the new technologies will foster new opportunities to develop businesses from home. Therefore, the physical location of labor is increasingly unimportant. And again, thinking about the idea that the physical location of labor is increasingly unimportant. As I learned when I was talking about economic, if you watch my clusters video, you'll have already heard this joke. You can think about call centers in India, right? Well, there's people in the US and the UK that have trouble with whatever they've bought, and therefore they call India. Well, it's cheaper to have an Indian labor force working in a call center because it doesn't cost anything to call them than it is to pay people in the UK, in the US, or whatever. Think of the number of people that can be consultants just through webcams. Okay. So this is also opening more and more opportunities out there. And of course, they talk about there are certain advantages to operating a business out of your home. And I like how they say it. They say, well, it can reduce startup costs, which can be a huge deal, right? Because renting an office, especially if you're like in Los Angeles, like where I used to live, oh my goodness, renting an office, forget it. So it reduces startup costs. They also give an interesting survey from people in Australia where they say 55% of respondents cite cost as the reason that they establish a home-based business versus another form of business. Another 20% cite convenience. In other words, you don't have to commute very far. And commutes can become very, very expensive and difficult and time-consuming. And they also cite family and domestic reasons, i.e. it's easy to take care of a child if you're working from home. Great. So they also give an interesting discussion on Michel de Certeau on page 432, those of you who are following along with the article. And they talk about this dichotomy between strategy and tactics. And those of you who watch my video on Alfred North Whitehead or Heterotopias or some of these other videos that I've got will already be familiar with this argument. But they look at strategy as kind of the big idea, the grandiose visions, the long-term plans, and the tactical looks at the quickly moving, the rapidly moving, short-term ideas in business. And what their argument in this particular article is that home-based businesses favor the tactical. Because there is so little startup costs and so little upfront business, so little upfront investment in many startup businesses, it's a lot easier to be at the tactical level and to be reactive to new opportunities as opposed to kind of having to do fancy market analysis and everything else, which can be quite costly. So they talk about de Certeau's reference to opaque local tactics. In other words, we don't exactly know what goes on in the everyday or the prosaic experiences of entrepreneurs, and therefore this article makes this particular contribution. Great. If you've enjoyed this video, make sure you give me a thumbs up, subscribe, and comment down below if you have any questions. Great. I'll see you in the next video where we're going to talk about the methodology used in this particular paper. See you then.